I'd just like to quickly thank organizations that have helped in this endeavor. American Civil Liberties Union of Ohio, American Friends Service Committee, Cleveland Nonviolence Network, Cleveland Peace Action, Council on American Islamic Relations, East Shore Unitarian Universalist Church Peace Seekers, Intercultural Interfaith Initiative, Interreligious Task Force on Central America, State Rep Nikki Antonio, Women Speak Out for Peace and Justice, Veterans for Peace, Chapter 39, Mike Fagan, who made the drones that are hanging up outside, Deborah Hirschberg, Donna Laird Cohen, Peggy Sarah, and Erica Pilsey. Everybody. The peace group has done a lot of work. Everybody's really pitched in. It's just been wonderful the way everybody has just picked up pieces and put the puzzle together, because it was a puzzle to us how we were going to do this. All of us being volunteers and all. But afterward, we were going to have the book signing outside, and I think that's the details you need to know at the moment. If something else occurs to me, I'll pop up at the end. So, without talking much more about the logistics, Medea Benjamin is a co-founder of both COPE and the International Human Rights Organization Global Exchange. Benjamin is the author of 8 books. Her latest book is Drone Warfare, Killing by Remote Control, and she has been campaigning to stop the use of killer drones. Her recent trips to Pakistan and Yemen helped shed a light on the innocent people killed by U.S. drone strikes. She has organized the first ever International Drone Summit. Benjamin has been an advocate for social justice for more than 30 years. Described as one of America's most committed and most effective fighters for human rights by New York Newsday, and one of the high-profile leaders of the peace movement by the Los Angeles Times, she was one of 1,000 exemplary women from 140 countries nominated to receive the Nobel Peace Prize on behalf of the millions of women who did the essential work of peace worldwide. In 2010, she received the Martin Luther King Jr. Peace Prize from the Fellowship of Reconciliation and the 2012 Peace Prize by the U.S. Peace Memorial. She's a former economist and nutritionist with the United Nations and World Health Organization. Since the September 11th, 2001 tragedy, Medea has been working to promote a U.S. foreign policy that will respect human rights and gain us allies instead of contributing to violence and undermining our international reputation. Medea has also been on the forefront of the anti-drone movement. Her articles appear regularly in outlets such as the Huffington Post, Common Dreams, Alternet, and Op-Ed News. So, Medea, welcome.
Well, thank you so much. How is this mic good? Yeah. Thank you so much, Jean and the whole group, and this really warm welcome. And it's great to see so many people out here for a teaching on drones. Raise your hand if this issue is somewhat new to you. And raise your hand if you heard Jeff Bezos say that he wanted to deliver packages to you with drones. So that looks like most of you. I don't know about you. I don't know how I feel about that one. I'm still kind of wrapping my head around it. I don't know if you saw a funny thing that Stephen Colbert did. He said, wow, you know, that's such a cool idea. I have an even better idea, though. Let's take it one step further. What if you actually could go to the place where all these goods are, and you could actually see them right there, and you could have a real high-tech thing like a cart, and you could pick them out and put them in there and have it right away. Wouldn't that be really cool? So, you know, who knows if we need our packages delivered to us by a drone, think that we are at a time right now when we're going to see more and more hype about the positive uses of drones. And we've got to get those people who like the drones to work with us to distinguish between the good and the bad uses of drones. So there's been a lot of great workshops that have happened already, and we have more. I'm going to go very quickly through the part of the drones and get to the discussion about what's happening now, because a lot of good things are going on. So the first is the Jeff Bezos. What are drones? Very quickly, they can be anything. I was staying at Jean's and Nikki this morning and looking out at their bird feeder and saw all these beautiful little birds, and I thought, uh-oh, one day one of them might be a drone and we won't even know, because they are mimicking nature. They're making them look like wasps and like drones and like bees. But they can be tiny like that as long as it flies in the air, it has a camera on it, and it's being piloted remotely. These small things can be piloted from your smartphone. That's a drone. The ones that you see here that have the bottom, oh no, the next one. The bottom one there is the one that the soldiers can fold up in their backpacks. Do we have any soldiers here who are from the post 9/11 era folks here? Well, a number of soldiers will tell you how they have learned to disassemble these and assemble these, and those are scouts. They go out, the drones, and relay the information back to the people in the field. But what I'm going to really be talking about is the Predator and the Reaper drones, the drones that are being used to kill people, as well as the drones being used to spy on people. These Predator and Reapers are made by General Atomics in Southern California, but every single major weapons manufacturer in the country is involved today in some way in drones because it is big, big business. For those of you who don't know how the drones work, they are being piloted from the United States. It's quite remarkable technology when you think about it, that you could sit in an Air Force base in the United States, and some of these you're in air-conditioned rooms, you're in ergonomic chairs, and you are spending your days looking at a screen, and somebody might tell you at some point to press a button and kill somebody. You're killing somebody thousands of miles away. You have probably never even been to that country, don't speak the language, don't know the culture, and you're being told to kill people thousands of miles away. It is really astounding what we have used the brains of our most brilliant scientists to come up with.
That's right.
And you think all the things we really need, and this is what they're coming up with. I have a chapter in the book that's being sold outside on what this is doing to the pilots, because it's really messing with them. And they find the same level of post-traumatic stress syndrome among these pilots as they do pilots in the battlefield. And maybe that's a good thing, because it means we're not programmed to be killers by day and lovers by night. People have asked, well, where are we using these? So we're using them in the places where we have been at war more formally, like in Iraq and Afghanistan, but also places where we haven't been at war, like Pakistan, Yemen, Somalia. We've used them in Libya, in the Philippines. And if you look at the bases where they are setting up new bases for the drones, it gives you a very worrisome idea of how these are being planned to proliferate. So across the Middle East there are bases. There are bases also in Northern Africa, now in West Africa. Also they're starting them along the Pacific area off the islands of Australia. One base that's mentioned here that I find particularly disturbing is Saudi Arabia. You might have, if anybody bothered, to look at some of the reasons why Osama bin Laden said he hated the United States. One of them was because we had bases in the Holy Lands around Mecca and Medina. Well, one of the smart things that George Bush did was to close those bases in Saudi Arabia, knowing how antagonistic they were. Now we have, under the Obama administration, they have opened a new U.S. base for drones in Saudi Arabia. I would say inviting blowback. Who has been killed by these drones? We don't know. We wish our government would tell us. One time, Lindsey Graham blurted out, oh, there have been about 4,700 people killed by these drones. We don't know if he was even including Afghanistan. We only know what has been pieced together by journalists, nothing that what our government tells us, because this is all being done in secret by secretive organizations like the CIA, not a military organization, Joint Special Operations Command, the secretive part of the military. So what we have put together, for example, in Pakistan, is that there are between 2,500 and 3,500 people killed, among them about 200 children. Our government, when we have forced them to say anything about the drones, have said that there are only a handful of innocent people that have been killed. What we learned from the journalists who pieced this together is there have only been a handful of high-level Al-Qaeda or Taliban people who have been killed. Only 2% of those who've been killed are people that we can actually place on those high-value target lists. So who are the rest of the thousands of people? They're either innocent people or they are low-level Taliban, low-level Al-Qaeda, low-level people who probably have absolutely no possibility of killing people from the United States. When we look at the case of Pakistan, I mentioned the numbers. I want to just give a couple of instances, a couple of individual cases, because this is what we don't see in the U.S. news. And I think if we saw more of these cases, we would see more of an outcry against the use of drones. This is a 68-year-old woman from Pakistan, Manama Bibi. She was out in her field picking okra with her grandchildren. All of a sudden, from the sky, a deafening noise, shrapnel flying everywhere, screams. Her body was blown to bits. They only found little pieces of it lying on the ground. 9 members of her family were hurt, taken to the hospital, and now these days, her family members, especially the grandchildren, live in constant fear that they will be hit by a drone, always asking the question, why was my grandmother killed, and never getting an answer. We can see another case here. Somebody asked earlier about Karim Khan. This is Karim Khan, a Pakistani man who is a very well-educated man. He was working in the capital city, had left his hometown, got a call in the middle of the night that his home had been targeted by a drone strike, and that his son, 18 years old, and his brother had been killed by a drone. Now, his brother was also a well-educated man who returned to the local village precisely because there were Taliban in that area, and he wanted to teach the people in the village, the children, that education is more powerful than weapons. And he said, imagine the lesson that those hundreds of children were taught when their beloved teacher was killed by a U.S. drone. So the drone strikes have been used a lot in Pakistan, over 350 drone strikes, the vast majority of them under the Obama administration. But then the Obama administration realized that while they were killing people in Afghanistan and Pakistan, they said that some of the leaders of Al-Qaeda were moving over to Yemen. And so they started increasing the drone strikes in Yemen under Obama starting in 2009. And Yemen, for anybody who doesn't know, is a very, very old traditional society, and they do not appreciate these weapons coming in from the sky from another country and just killing people. And this is one person whose brother was killed by a drone. His name is Mohammed Al-Gawi. His brother was driving a taxi cab one day, picked up strangers, which you tend to do in a taxi cab, and a half hour later, the taxi was blown up, a smoldering mound of metal. all they could find were small pieces of his brother, and he took them, these are the children who will never see their father again, the widow who will never see their father again. And if we could go back to a second to look at Mohammed's face, anyone want to say what you see in his face? What expression? So some people have said a questioning, confused, others said kindness, gentleness, and others said anger. I would say what you're seeing here is anger. This man is very angry at the United States. He didn't even want to meet with us when we said we were Americans. And when he was convinced to meet with us, he told us that he has never gotten any acknowledgement from the United States about what happened to his brother, as much as they have asked and asked and asked. And he said that he's from a very proud tribe, and in his tribal culture, if you have a terrible mistake or you commit a crime, you have to do something to redress that. He said you have to acknowledge what you did, you have to apologize, and you have to provide compensation to the family that you have harmed. He said, could it be that my tribal culture is more advanced when it comes to justice than the United States of America? I think we in this room have the answer for that one. So, in the, this is an interesting case, go back one. I've been telling you so far about people who said that their loved ones had nothing to do with extremists, that they were in the wrong place at the wrong time, they have no idea why their loved ones was targeting. This was another case when we met with a young girl in Yemen, and we're sitting in her apartment, and she's telling us about her 3 brothers. And she said her 3 brothers were fighting against a dictatorship that existed at that time, and the only group that they found that was fighting against the dictatorship was called Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. And her 3 brothers joined Al-Qaeda. She said, my brothers had no idea about the United States, no interest in killing Americans. They were involved in an internal struggle. This young woman said, I think my brothers were really stupid. I think they should have chosen other ways to fight the dictatorship. And she said, I'm smarter. I went online. I Googled Al-Qaeda. I find out all about Al-Qaeda, and I saw how bloodthirsty they were, and I tried to get my brothers to get away from this gang that they had gotten involved with. And it kind of occurred to us, because I was there with my partner who has young boys the same age, lives in LA, and knows a lot about gangs and people getting involved with gangs. And all of a sudden it kind of hit me. Well, that's what Al-Qaeda, that's why a lot of teenagers are joining groups like Al-Qaeda or other fundamentalist groups, because they're looking out for some way to be fighting against either perceived injustice or because they have very few options, job opportunities, they don't have a good educational system, and her 3 brothers got involved with the wrong gang. She said, my brothers needed re-education. My brothers needed a chance to surrender because they wanted to. My brothers did not need the United States getting involved in an internal issue and coming and blowing up young men who were 18, 19, and 20 years old. Somebody else talked about this morning, and I think it's so important to recognize that it's not just an issue about who is being killed and hurt by the shrapnel. It's an issue of understanding that something specific about this technology means that you can hover over these villages for days and weeks at a time, terrorizing entire communities. I went to Gaza, where the Israelis are using this technology in Gaza, and one of the women said it's like having a bee inside your head that you can't get out because you hear the buzzing constantly. And so you always think that it's after you. You always think that drone is out to get you, you just never know where and when. And another woman in Yemen, who's a youth representative for her community, said, my community has 250,000 people in it. You are terrorizing 250,000 people in your war on terror. And the information that came out in the studies done by Stanford Law School and NYU Law School called Living Under Drones, very important. I incorporated it into the new edition of my book because it really shows how this is disintegrating the fabric of the community, with people afraid to go to community gatherings, afraid to go send their kids to school, but also starting to doubt each other and wondering, was it my neighbor who turned me in and said that I was Al-Qaeda? Was it a tribe that we had an old feud with decades ago? And so it's pitting family against family. And I mentioned that people are afraid to go, oh, I guess the photo didn't come up, but some of you might have remembered just in December when somebody in the United States who is looking at a screen says, aha, there's a convoy of cars that are riding along a road, and I know Al-Qaeda has been active in that area, this must be an Al-Qaeda convoy. And what did they do? They went and sent in the drones and killed 12 people who were part of a wedding party. The real issue about these drones is that they make enemies. We had a friend in Yemen say to us that when the Obama administration started using the drones in 2009, there were maybe 200 people who were part of a group called Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, and today there are over 1,000. He said that in his village that had been hit by a drone, he said, we know everybody in the village. If anybody was a high-level Al-Qaeda, we would have known about it, and we would have caught him and captured him. And he said that in Yemen, he thought that everybody who had been killed by a drone could have been captured, and that there was not an effort made to capture those people. You might recall that President Obama, when he was running for office, said that he was going to close Guantanamo. Guantanamo been closed? No. But what they did do is get together and say, well, if we picked up people in places like Yemen, what are we going to do with them? If we put them in Guantanamo, it's going to look really hypocritical to do that. And so instead, they've been using drones to kill people instead of capturing them. And this young man said to us that one drone strike in his village, he said, a village so small you could not see it on Google Maps, did more than the extremists were able to do ever, which is turn the entire village against the United States. So one of the issues about the drones that we should be concerned about is the model that we are putting forth to the rest of the world to say we can go anywhere we want, we can kill anybody we want on the basis of secret information, but we're not the only ones who have the drones. We are selling these. And the number of countries keeps going up. I think somebody this morning mentioned 78. The last thing I saw were now 87 countries that have some kind of drones. Most of these are surveillance drones. There's about 10 to 15 countries that are in the process of weaponizing their drones. But drones are big business, and the companies that make the drones want to sell them. The number one exporter of drones is not even the United States. It is Israel. The U.S. is the number 2 exporter, and of course the country that says, aha, big business, we can make them cheaper and quicker than anybody else is China. And China is in the drone-based business in a big way. So we do have to worry about when is the next country going to use drones, whether it's using them in another country or here in the United States, who knows, but a spokesperson for the White House who left office said, I would hate to be the spokesperson for the White House berating another country when they've used a drone against us here in the United States. We don't have to just worry about drones being used by another country against us. We have to worry about drones being used right here in the United States by our own government or individuals who get their hands on drones. Now this picture here is part of a much larger issue, and this is the issue of the militarization of our police forces. And those of you who follow this issue know that a lot of things that are being used in the military overseas are now being imported and used into our police forces, whether it's the kind of assault weapons that police are carrying, whether it's the big tanks that you see here, or whether it's getting their hands on drones. Now, right now, there's all kind of restrictions on the use of drones, but the drone manufacturers have forced our Congress, by creating their own drone caucus in Congress, by giving lots of money to Congress people, by writing the legislation. The legislation now says that our own airspace has to be open up to drones by 2015. That's just a year away. And in the meantime, the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, which is in charge of the airspace, has been giving out special permits to test the use of drones. And there are dozens of police stations that have gotten these special permits. Now they say, oh, it's for search and rescue missions, it's for finding lost children, or your grandfather with Alzheimer's who is roaming around in the streets and nobody can find him. But they also brag that these are designed to be weaponized. And in this one that you see here, they were bragging about how it was designed to be weaponized. The funny thing about this is that the Sheriff's Department called a press conference to show off their new drone, and they were very excited about how they were manipulating it and having it go around in the air until it crashed into the tank. The good thing about all of this is that there is a movement, and you here, by being here, are part of this movement. And the movement is twofold. The movement is, how are we going to regulate the use of drones here in the United States, and how are we going to stop the use of killer drones overseas? And I think it's important to meld those two issues together, because it gives us a much broader possible coalition to work with. In terms of here in the United States, it is quite remarkable. And do we have our lawyer here from the ACLU still with us, who talked earlier? Raise your hand here, because can you stand up for a minute and give her applause for the work she's doing? That you talk to us during the discussion about what is happening here in Ohio on the statewide level to regulate the use of drones, because the ACLU has been absolutely remarkable in getting legislation introduced and in many places passed to try to say things like law enforcement agencies cannot use drones unless there is a court order and probable cause, and, as you told me in the break, also trying to bring in issues of trying to stop the weaponization of drones, because even when people think, oh, that's not going to happen in my state, think again. And just a couple of the states where that has already been passed, Florida, Illinois, Idaho, Montana, North Carolina, Oregon, Tennessee, Virginia, and Texas. Now, one thing in that list that you might think about is those are not necessarily very liberal states. And so this is an issue where there are a lot of libertarians, Tea Party folks, all kinds of people that are concerned about privacy issue. I know in California, there's a lot of marijuana growers who don't want drones over their land. There's a lot of Tea Party people who say, if I see a drone over my home, I'm going to shoot it down. I think we should also think about the communities who are already over-targeted and would be even more targeted with these drones. Anybody want to throw out your ideas of what communities? What? Muslim community. African American community. Latino community, immigrant community, activist community. That's right. Our communities are already way over-surveilled. This drone technology will allow them to become, as the ACLU has said, a 24/7 surveillance society. So this kind of work is happening on the state level. It's also happening on the citywide level, but not many cities have passed these resolutions, and we've got to do something about it, because even if it's just symbolic on the citywide level, every time a city passes it, we can get national media coverage for that, and that gets the debate going. So some of the cities that have done this is Charlottesville, Virginia, Evanston, Illinois, Northampton, Massachusetts, Syracuse, New York, and I know Peter Lems, where are you? Peter Lems, AFSC. You're doing it in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia? Indianapolis. And hopefully in your workshop you'll talk more about this? Yes. So very important to think about getting these resolutions passed on the citywide level. And it doesn't matter if you're in a big city or a little city. Sometimes it's having it in a little city that can get a lot of attention. We've got to get dozens of cities passing these resolutions and continue to do the work on the statewide level. There have been a growing protest movement around the use of drones overseas, and can you raise your hand if you've been involved in any of those protests? Not enough of you at all. We've got to get more going on locally around that, and of course you can do it right in front of your congresspeople's office, because they have really been missing in action in this whole issue. I mean, it is quite remarkable to me, and I must say disgusting, and here I am at one of the many hearings that we go to bring this issue up in Congress. If this kind of action were happening during the Bush administration, there would be such an outcry among liberal Democrats in the Congress that I think we would have put an end to the use of killer drones. But it's happening under the Obama administration. And so our natural allies in all of this have been way, way, way too silent. And this is really a reflection also of the larger movement. You know, we would have tens of thousands of people out on the street if this were happening under the Bush administration. So it's very sad to be in Congress these days and to see that the best thing they can muster is something that they just came out with last week, is saying to the administration, will you please, please at least tell us every year how many civilians you're killing? Just let us know. That's coming from like the most progressive Democrats. So we're not going to get our solutions from the Democratic Party. We're not going to get our solutions from Congress in this. Although there are bills that have been introduced at the national level around domestic drones, they still don't have the umph. And certainly on the international issue, the Democrats have given President Obama a free pass when it comes to the use of these killer drones. But on the positive side, there are movements that have been happening, and those have been happening, regular protests outside the bases where the drones are being used. They are happening every single week at the White House, every single week at the CIA, at the Pentagon. The group Veterans for Peace in Southern California has a weekly protest outside the headquarters of General Atomics. And this, since we are in a church right now, I wanted to just spend a minute talking about how long it's taken the faith-based community to start speaking out about this. And that too is something that has been so puzzling to me. When I wrote the book on drones, I dedicated a chapter to these ethical and moral issues of killing people without a trial, of giving the president the right to be the prosecutor, judge, jury, and executioner. I mean, these are intense moral issues. And yet it has been so hard to get faith-based leaders to speak out against this. Well, that is starting to change, and it's actually changed on a very, very high level, and that is the World Council of Churches, which is the largest aggregation of Christian-based churches, and based in Geneva. And just last month, they came out with a declaration saying that the use of of these killer drones was immoral, and that more work had to be done to stop this. And now I think we have to go down to the denominations and get them to pass resolutions on a denominational level, and get churches and mosques and synagogues to debate these issues and put out statements on the level of the individual churches. And I think we should have hundreds of them coming out throughout the United States week after week, another church, another synagogue, another mosque, saying, we will not tolerate this. This is a moral outrage. We don't care who's in the White House. This is not about Democrats and Republicans. This is about morality. Martin Luther King III was out in Oakland just last week and gave a sermon, and in that sermon he did speak out against the drones, and we're going to take that piece and put it online and try to get more leaders in the Black community to speak out, because President Obama needs to know that this is coming from all sectors of society. So some other places where we're seeing lots of protests, well, of course, in the places where the drones are being used. And that particularly is in Pakistan, where there have been massive demonstrations. The one you see in the picture here is one that we happen to be at. And let me tell you, it was a little scary going out into this massive sea of people, being an American, and the sea of people was just about all men. And here we were, a feminist Code Pink group that was invited and get out on that, during that rally to speak to the crowd. And I was the spokesperson for it, and when I got out there and started speaking and saying we came from the United States to convey a message that we are totally against the use of these killer drones in your communities that has killed 200 of your precious children, and that your children are as precious as ours, and please accept our apology for their death. And you should have seen just the roar of the crowd and the amount of goodwill that we got by being there and showing our opposition to that policy. And here we are on the streets and meeting with some of the drone strike victims. We also, the next day, went out and did a Ramadan-type fast in a public place where people could come to us all day long and engage in conversation about this issue. And some of the comments we got is that just by being there, and we were on TV every day, we were in the newspapers, they said, you did more for the goodwill of Americans than your government has been doing with the billions of dollars that it has been throwing into our country over the years. So this citizen-to-citizen kind of diplomacy is so important. Other things that have been happening on the in Yemen, and in Pakistan. One more thing I wanted to show. This just happened last week, that Pakistan introduced into the Human Rights Council in Geneva a resolution condemning the use of drones, and the United States not only boycotted the session, but lobbied hard to get countries not to vote for it. I am happy to say that it did pass at the UN, and that now they have set up a panel that is supposed to be bringing more information back in September, but there's been quite a good dialogue going on at the United Nations, condemning the United States, Israel, and any other country that is using these killer drones. Another thing that's happened is that this issue just came up at the European Union. And the European Union had a vote that was quite remarkable in how, quote, lopsided it was, in that there were over, I think it was 529 votes condemning the targeted killing and only 29 in favor. It wasn't specifically about the drones. It called it targeted killings, but the targeted killings are being done by drones, and it said European countries should not be involved and should not be aiding other countries that are involved in this. So that's a really positive thing that we see happening. And another positive development that just happened this week, if you go back, go back one, is that the drone victims themselves in Yemen have set up their own association. First time this has happened ever anywhere. They held their own press conference last week. Our friends there said that it was so crowded that the media barely had room to all get inside, and that these drone strike victims were extremely eloquent as they got up and they demanded justice. And they demanded that there be accountability, that the people who are involved in these drone strikes, the people who are aiding in the use of the drone strikes, should be brought to justice. I want to put this in the context of the larger issue of militarization, because as we know, drones are just one piece of technology. And it's important that we focus on that, but it's important we recognize that this is part of a much larger issue about militarization. It's a much larger issue about the invasion of other countries. What we did to Iraq is just criminal. The way that we have left Iraq as a broken country is just criminal. The continued involvement of our troops in Afghanistan, and with the elections happening now, the Obama administration is still trying to get an agreement from Afghanistan to leave thousands of our troops there. We have not, in 12 years, accomplished a stable government in Afghanistan that has the loyalty of its people. We're not going to do it in 13 years or 14 years. We are part of the problem. We are not part of the solution. The other issue is about the 800 plus bases that we have lined around the world that are this incredible footprint in other people's countries. If a foreign country wanted to have a base in the United States, we would just say absolutely impossible. In fact, it's just laughable to think about it. Then why should other countries accept having US bases in their countries? We should close the foreign military bases. We would save a lot of money and make people like us a lot better. So just a couple of other things. Stop supporting repressive governments. That would go a long way to be well-liked around the world. And when we talk about repressive governments, this one picture here is from Gaza after Operation Cast Lead, when the Israelis invaded Gaza in 2006, killed over 1,400 people, vast majority of them innocent people. And that's done with our tax dollars, continues to be done to this day with over $3 billion of our tax money. And in a place like Egypt, where we've been giving over $1 billion in our tax money going to the military that is now in power today. On the other side of this, I show Saudi Arabia, because we are not giving money to Saudi Arabia. We are having the largest weapons trade deals ever in the history of the world with Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia is, in case you don't know it, no democracy. Not only does it repress people in its own countries and do things like stopping women from even having the right to drive, but has used those tanks and other weapons that we have sold to them to crush democracy movements in neighboring Bahrain. I did mention the issue about Guantanamo, but it continues to be a blight, not only to keep over 150 people who are still there 10 years on, most of them already cleared for release, saying they are no harm and have not been a harm to the United States, but we've still refused to return them. President Obama should do what he promised to do when he ran for office, which is close Guantanamo. And as we're talking about Guantanamo, let's remember it's also an issue about torture. And we are just at the point where the Senate Intelligence Committee has finally released the study that they have been working on for years and years and years, and it's now going to the White House and the CIA. Let's hope the CIA doesn't redact every page of that and give us basically nothing. We want to see that report, and not only do we want to see it, but we think that it should be the first step towards holding accountable people who were actually doing and involved in the torture. So lastly, let let me say, on the drone front, I think that we have made some incredible progress. We've actually forced the administration to start talking about it more. We forced the media to talk about it more. The polls are changing from 82% saying that it was they were supporting the use of drones to kill terrorist suspects overseas to now 60%. It's a precipitous drop in a year and a half and continues to go down. We have also forced our government to stop using as many drones. There's a big drop in the number of drone strikes that have been used in Pakistan. They're still being used a lot in Afghanistan and still being used in Yemen, so we have a lot more work to do. But I think that we're in a good place as far as the work that we're doing for peace, because the American people are tired of war. It's talked about war weariness. I like to say the American people have become war wise. That we understand that the invasion of other countries, the occupation of other countries has not left them better off, and it's drained our resources, killed our soldiers, and killed untold numbers of people in those countries. That when we want to help other countries, we should look for other answers. And the other answers, I'll end by quoting this young woman, who is a woman from Yemen that I met and I was so taken with. She is a journalist, and she wrote something about how fundamentalists and politics are a terrible mix, and those religious people should just get out of politics. Well, it didn't go over too well with some people. There was a fatwa placed on her head, and Al-Qaeda was after her. She said she had to go into hiding. And I said, what did you do? She said, well, you know, this is a very conservative society. Most women wear a full head covering. I just put that on for a year. Nobody knew who I was. And a year later, I felt comfortable enough to go around without it. And I said, well, you must hate Al-Qaeda, and you must like the drones. And she said, wait a minute. I hate Al-Qaeda, and I hate the drones. She said, I think Al-Qaeda are a bunch of thugs. They're a bunch of criminals. I think they should be arrested. I think they should be tried, and if found guilty, I think they should be put away. That's what democratic societies do. When you send in a drone, you take a criminal and you turn them into a martyr. And I don't want Al-Qaeda to be martyrs. And you also create new recruits for Al-Qaeda, and I don't want new recruits. And she said, you know, I am a representative in our government now looking about how do we build a democratic Yemen. And I scratch my head sometimes when I look at the United States and see how the American people are tolerating this. She said, if you can go back and give the message that if Americans want to help us get rid of extremism in this country, there are many ways that they can do it. They can support civil society. They can help us build up our judicial system. They can help us secure our jails so that if people are found guilty, they will not escape from jail. She said you can empower women, improve the educational system in this country, help us to create jobs. All of this will move our society to being more democratic. And these are things we would like to see the United States doing. But sending in the drones sends in the opposite message. And we in Yemen think of the vision for the future, a future of a democratic Yemen, and the picture of a predator or a Reaper drone does not fit into our vision. Well, let's take our words to heart and say our future vision for our more democratic union does not include Predator drones, Reaper drones, Hellfire missiles. It includes spreading love and compassion and the positive solutions that we can give, including negotiations, nonviolent conflict resolution. That's the kind of thing we would like to see spread around the world. Thank you.
Can you hear me? cards at the end of each aisle and pens. If you have questions, please write them down and pass them to the sides. We'll have people going up the aisles to collect them. And now I have the mic. Okay, thank you, Bob. I forgot to mention that, although we made this a free event, we are collecting donations. If you feel so called to do that, there's a donation box out at the registration table. I forgot to mention also that we have the drone quilt project here. There are 4 quilts hung throughout the church that each panel represents a victim of a drone strike. And this has been traveling around the country. We had it on the east side, Plymouth Church for a couple weeks. It's been here for a couple weeks, and the Lakewood Public Library has agreed to hang them for the rest of the month of April. And so if you have friends that you might want to take and show them, I think it's a visual of what we're doing. It's very touching. This is a smoke-free campus. If you feel like you need to have a break, you have to go out to the sidewalk. And Nikki's going to do the question and answer period. And so pass your questions to the side. And when we're done, though, we're going to get Medea out to do the book signing. So if you have things you need to talk to her about, you have to maybe buy the book at that point and ask her then. So.
And we were passing around the sign-up sheet. I don't know if for Pink, if that is going around. Yes. Has anybody not signed it who would like to be on? Great.
Okay. How are you? How are you? Okay, good. Glad you're still here. Thank you. My name's Nikki Antonio, and we appreciate you all being here and writing down your questions. We're going to start with a question. What is President Obama's legal justification for the collateral deaths caused by the drone strikes?
Well, first of all, he minimizes the collateral deaths and says that, he said in his May 23rd speech at the National Defense University that they would only use the drones if there was a near certainty that there wouldn't be civilian casualties. Well, a couple of months after that was the wedding party strike that I mentioned in Yemen. So one is that he minimalizes it, and second, there is in international law an issue about proportionality. So if you are going to kill somebody that is about to do greater harm and kill more people, then you are justified in that killing, and that's the justification he would use.
This question is, how do you view the relationships between the federal and local law enforcement and their relationship with the military and intelligence agencies? So I guess it's, and obviously as it relates to the drones, but the crossover between federal and local.
I think what we're seeing is that there is so much crossover when you look at just the issue of NSA spying and how that goes from the local to the national and even the international. And that's of great concern. I mean, I know that for my non-violent activities of getting arrested against these wars, that information has been shared with other states, and it's been shared internationally so that I can't even get into Canada. When I try to get into Canada, they print up something called the FBI National Database, and in that comes out arrests at the White House. And that is considered enough cause for Canada to say you can't come in here. So there's way too much sharing information from the local to the state to the national and international.
Well, then the next question sort of is a follow-up to that. Have you been, air quotes, interviewed by the FBI, CIA, or otherwise harassed by the U.S. government?
Yes, but I don't want to scare people on that because I think then people think, you get involved in this stuff and you're always watched. Guess what? You're always watched anyway. So you might as well give them something to watch.
Hi! Okay. Everyone wave and smile. So this question is, who or what groups, if there are any, work with Code Pink on the drone issues? Is there a coalition?
There's a wonderful coalition, and it's kind of a loosely knit coalition. We've come together at times for drone summits in DC or for actions like this is now the April Week of Actions, and so you're part of the April Week of Action, April Month of Actions. So groups that we work very closely with are reflected here. The Veterans for Peace, American Friends Service Committee, Peace Action, WILF. You want to shout out some of the other organizations that work on this? ACLU, definitely. We work very closely with Catholic Workers, with Pax Christi. When I was mentioning the church groups, there is, to my knowledge, only one national church group that has come out against drones on the national level, and that is the Church of the Brethren. Am I wrong, Peter? Do you know?
I think that might be right.
So we've got to get more, but it is a loosely coalition.
I want to, one local group that's been very helpful in this too is the Committee for American Islamic Relations, CARE.
Excellent. Yes. And we work with CARE on the national level and also a number of other Muslim American groups like MAS and ADC, Arab American Anti-Discrimination Committee.
So there's two questions here that are just sort of detail-oriented. The first one is, are drones made in different sizes? And then, what is a Reaper drone? So kind of the nuts and bolts, I guess, of the drones.
Well, I tried to show that with the photos. The drones can be tiny, and they can be the size of a beetle. They're even making these nanogram things where it could be like the size of a grain of sand. It's really amazing in a terrifying way. Drones can be of any size. They're also being programmed to work together in swarms. So you could have a swarm that looks like a swarm of bees. And the Predator and Reaper drone are the larger ones that carry the missiles on them. They don't have to. Predators and Reapers are the ones that are being used along the border of Mexico and by the Border Patrol in Canada as well. Some of them are weaponized and some of them aren't.
And that also answers a question that somebody asked about. Okay, so this is a little different. What types of weapons do the police or our local law enforcement talk about putting on drones? Missiles, machine guns, tear gas sprayers?
Well, what I've heard talked about is tear gas, is stun grenades, tasers. Is there anything you'd want to add to that? Those kinds of things. One policeman talked about a 12-gauge shotgun on a drone.
Okay. So another question is, do you believe that we have the right to impose our own idea of democracy on other countries? And then another question is, what response to 9/11 would you have supported if we could go back in time?
Well, I think we should clean up our own democracy before thinking about imposing it on others. And stopping support to repressive governments would be a good way to start if we want to get involved in other countries' democracies. I would have said that 9/11 was a crime against humanity and that we should have used the global police services to find, identify, capture, and bring to justice anybody who was involved in that.
Another question. Can you talk a little bit about the sort of cabal right now with Senator Feinstein, President Obama, the CIA, members of Congress, a threat of blackmail investigation, kind of, what's going on with all of that?
Well, I'm not sure sure which cabal that's referring to, but let's say it's the cabal around it could be the cabal around the NSA spying, where I would say that in Senator Feinstein's case, it's quite remarkable that she was fine with the NSA spying on every one of us. But then she found out that they were spying on her, and she didn't like that. And on this torture report, it came out that the spying was on her own committee. And all of a sudden, that was a big issue. Well, it's also very funny because we have a strong Code Pink in California, and the Code Pink in California is constantly going to Dianne Feinstein's house and doing protests outside her house. And so we have taken these little pink drones that are like, you buy their toys for children. They are toys. They cost like $3.95, that is. And we would just fly them around her window. And so, at a hearing, she said, and there was this protest at my house, and I looked outside, and oh my God, there was a drone spying on me. And she said, we have to do something about this privacy issue. So we recommend getting these little drones and taking them out to everywhere you can where there's an elected official who thinks drones are cool, and let them see them.
Okay, so this question is what to say when people say it's better to have drones killing our enemies than our soldiers who could get killed.
So I would say that that's all part of the same, that you look at everything as a nail and everything needs the hammer. Those are both part of the same response. It's a militarized response. Drones, you might think, can get you into a war, a conflict without killing your own people, and then you find, it's going to take more than that. We're not winning. Maybe we better send in some special commandos, and maybe that'll get us in farther, so they can lead to wars. Or it can lead to making people so angry at us that they come here and blow something up. I mean, who knows? It's part of a militarized response. We want to say we've been trying that for over 12 years now. Let's try something else. And the something else is non-military response.
So I'm not sure that this is really a question, but the concept of Shura in Islam is based upon voting, mutual concern, mutual consensus, conflict resolution, which is like democracy. It sounded like that was important to put out there.
You know,
I'm sorry, Sharia.
Because there's so much concentration on a European word, democracy. Most languages don't understand the word, especially in Muslim countries. So there's this, propaganda put out that in these countries there's no mechanism for participatory government. But the whole basis of government, ideally in Islam, is based upon the concept of shura, which is mutual respect, mutual consensus, conflict resolution, and voting. And that's never talked about. Like, it's recently the discussion that the first democratic presidential transfer of power in Afghanistan is about to take place. That's never happened in the history of the world. There never was an elected leader ever elected in Egypt, which is the oldest country on the planet. And this is just so, it's just, I don't even know how to describe the arrogance of that, but it's, in addition to being arrogant, it's wrong. So I think that's one of the things we need to keep talking about, these other concepts.
And if we want to really develop concept of democracy, then you take away all restrictions on money in politics, and you have a U.S.-style democratic election. I don't think we want to impose that on the rest of the world.
Here's a question, and also an accolade. I'm a longtime fan, and am interested in your statistics for future induction into a Hall of Fame for Peace. How many times have you been ejected from congressional hearings?
Well, it's so many that I can't count them, but I know that I was at one yesterday before coming here, and it reminded me of why we stand up for our rights constantly, because it was a hearing around government. It was the intelligence services, and there's so many of them, you can't keep track of them, and that was in the Defense Department. And we went there, and it was supposed to be an open public hearing. So the 4 witnesses, and one was the deputy director of the NSA, and we were there with our stop spying glasses on and our signs. And if you haven't seen them, you got to see them. They're like huge glasses like this, because when they tell us we can't hold up signs, then they got to say you have to take your glasses off. And we say, I need my glasses. So they stop spying in them. And so we sit there in the back, we look like kind of ants. And they went up one by one, and they gave these ridiculous opening statements. And the opening statement for the NSA included a statement saying they meticulously look out for the privacy of individuals in this country. And no, scrupulously, that was the word, scrupulously. Which we just couldn't help bursting out laughing when they said that. But then after they made their opening statements, they said, okay, now we will go into closed session. Imagine that. So there was no discussion, nothing went into closed session. And we were furious. And we got up and we started saying, you know, what is this? That we want to hear some questioning these ridiculous opening statements. Not that you're going to question them very hard, but at least, you know, ask something. And instead they closed the whole thing down. Now, if we weren't there, there would have been no yelling and screaming about what happened to the public session. But the police came in and they said, take off your glasses, go outside, and then we had a big fight with the police. We did not get arrested because I knew I had to come here, and I did not want to get arrested. But every time we go in, we stand up for the public, and we stand up and say, we want real questioning. Dianne Feinstein, not just when you get spied on, when we're all getting spied on. Dianne Feinstein, not just when you happen to think that maybe something was wrong, but when we see the use of drones. Dianne Feinstein has said the drones have been fine this entire time. So I don't like getting arrested. I don't think it's a very cool thing or a fun thing, but unfortunately, it's necessary.
Well, we appreciate that you put yourself out there for that. So we're the last. We're fine. We're the last.
She keeps saying it. Time's up.
I know. We're fine. We're good. We have one last question. Our timekeeper, Sue Otto, will be very happy because she's doing a good job here. Let's give her a hand. So, in our one of our morning panelists asked us to ask ourselves how well we have done in the past 40 years in our peace and justice work, and spoke to the need for a conscious, coherent strategy. How do you think activists can move from business as usual activism, air quotes, reacting to what happens, to a more conscious, coherent strategy when we're able to take on the power structure and build the life we really want to live? How can we do that?
Well, we've done a lousy job, a terrible job. If we had done a good job, we wouldn't be sitting here today. We would be out enjoying the beautiful weather or doing something else. So yes, I mean, we haven't been able to eliminate war. We certainly haven't been able to eliminate the undue influence of corporations in our lives in general. We see the increase in money in politics, which is just devastating to our democracy. We see the not only military-industrial complex, we see the prison complex that has made it a for-profit business to take our young people and throw them into prisons. We see what we've done with the immigration system and made that a for-profit business to want to use up all the beds in the detention centers and having the largest number of people being deported. So, and then just look at the environment and what we've done to destroy the very basis of life on this planet. So there's a lot to be done. But I think that we've got to be positive in our outlook. Otherwise, it's very hard to get up in the morning and keep doing this work, and it's hard to attract other people to it. And I would appreciate a much larger discussion on the ways that we should be organizing, but just to throw out a couple of things that I think have been positive, I think the fact that there are strong powers in this country right now who are lobbying for us to do a military attack on Iran's nuclear facilities, and that could lead us into a really horrendous wide war. And those include the largest foreign policy lobby in the United States, and that is AIPAC, the pro-Israel lobby. The forces that have organized to counter that have been really pretty extraordinary, and it's been a broad-based coalition of people that have come together and that have really reached out into the grassroots of our community. And we also saw that when the president wanted to take us into a war on Syria. And certainly my heart goes out to the people of Syria for what is happening, but I know from past experience that U.S. military involvement is not the answer to that. And when I saw the spontaneous uprising of people around the United States to say no to that, I think that's another positive example of Americans understanding that these wars are not going to help the people they're intended to help, and that they're really going to hurt us here at home. And I also think that a lot of the work that people like you are doing here to try to tie in the issues of how much money we're spending on war to the issues of why can't people have a cost of college education that they can afford, if not free college education, which many other countries have. Why can't we have a single-payer healthcare system that eliminates the insurance companies? And why can't we have the kind of high-speed rail that the Chinese or the Europeans have? This is all because we're spending so much money on war. And the more we do to reach out to the communities who are victimized by the priorities that we have right now, the more we do to connect these dots, the smarter we will be in the organizing we do. So I look forward to those conversations, and I look forward to building a stronger movement. The last thing I'd say about the movement is if there's something that must have been taught to us in these last 5 years of the Obama administration, which is you might have somebody that's a nice person in office, and the next one might be wearing sometimes a skirt, but it doesn't mean that we can put down our guard, and that our movements have to be movements that are not tied at the hip to any political party. See the first woman president, just like it was really thrilling to see the first African-American president. Let's remember, grassroots movements need to be grassroots, effective, non-partisan, mobilizing forces to change anybody's mind in the White House. We have to be that countervailing force. Thank you.
So we'd like to thank Medea Benjamin. As was mentioned before, there will be books, and she will be doing a book signing out in the outer rotunda area. You'll find that on your way out. Let's thank her one more time for being here today.